everybody. Welcome back, or welcome to the practice of being human. And welcome to our conversation today. I am so pleased to welcome Denise Harris to the podcast. She is the mother of Holly Harris, and Holly and I did a podcast episode about almost a year ago, last May. And Denise and I are going to similarly walk the sacred journey that Holly and I did, but from the vantage point of the mom and walking a cancer diagnosis journey. And so I'll give a little bit of background on Holly. She's a former client, a dear human, cancer survivor. And she shared with us, I think, one of the most profound conversations we've had here. She shared the journey that began with a brain tumor diagnosis in her 20s. She then had surgery, chemo, radiation, and she spoke about how facing her greatest fear reorganized her life, how it literally stripped away anxiety, it sharpened her clarity, and it brought her into deeper presence with what truly matters. And I like to think about that conversation as resilience, about identity. It was about resiliency, and it was about the unexpected gifts that I think hard times, illness, diagnoses, heartbreak, anything that brings us to our knees, these are the unexpected gifts of those kinds of experiences. And I can still picture Holly and I sitting outside the Morris Inn at Notre Dame. I was drinking, I think, green tea. It was warm and lovely. And she told me, she just proceeded to share with me the year that she would say broke her open. And what was also really powerful in that was knowing that her story was, she was sharing her walk. We also know that no story is anyone's alone, right? It's a story that we all share. And when one person in a family receives a diagnosis, the entire relational field shifts. Because, as we know, illness does not happen in isolation, and it does reorganize everyone and everything. And so today, we turn toward the other side of the same sacred story. Because when Holly walked into this journey, her mother walked into, and maybe not with a diagnosis in her body, but with something I think equally profound in her heart. So, dear Denise, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. It's such an honor, and it's lovely to finally meet you after all these years of hearing about you. I welcome sharing my side of the journey that our family has gone through.
And when I reached out to you after, I think Holly had mentioned that I would be very interested and happy to have you on the podcast to talk about your walk with this, you wrote back and said, there was a line in your text that really struck me, which was having to be her rock while keeping my emotions at bay was challenging. And then you went on to say we were always close, but became even closer during this chapter. And so I think that's where we're going to start today. If you would like to just take that however you would like, and we can go from there.
Yeah, so getting very emotional just thinking about that time. But yeah, it's like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
January 31st, 2024. We came back from DC from picking her up because Ira and I were already in DC for a concert. And when she was told she needed to go directly to the ER, so we dropped our bags and she and I went directly to the ER, and we sat for 6 hours in the ER because it was crazy busy before we were even seen by anyone. And we were placed in a hallway because there were no rooms available. And after she got the MRI, and I knew in my gut that there was something wrong because no one was telling us anything. And I was, trying to be a cheerleader to Holly. Oh, it's going to be fine, but I just knew. And when I finally went up to the nurse's station and said, what is taking so long? And the MRI was like hours ago. We should know something by now. And it's like, oh, well, someone has to sign off on it. And I knew the way she looked that that wasn't true. And then when they finally gathered us and took us back to a room, my heart just sank. And when we heard it, it was a mass. And I looked at her, she was already crying, and then I started bawling. And they were telling us, okay, so we got to gather a team and, and do all these things. And so I'm holding her and telling her it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And then all at once, I was like, okay, this is it. God's got this. We're going to get through it. We're going to let them tell us what we need to do, and we're going to go from there. And she didn't want to hear it. She was just crying. Our faith tells us that God didn't put us here for any other reason but to do his will. So we got to listen to him and be strong. And she was still crying, and I'm still holding her, just listening to her cry, not trying to talk her out of, crying, but just holding her until, she settled down. And then they finally gave us another private room when they gathered the team to talk to us about the next steps. And all these people are coming in, and I'm thinking, who are all these people? You had the social workers, and I'm just like, okay. So I got on the phone. I said, Ira, you need to get here now, because I'm not going to remember everything that's said. It's just overwhelming to it. However, I was still calm in that matter, because in 2019, I was going through the same thing with my mom with ovarian cancer in the hospital, and learning about all these things that I didn't know about, like palliative care and all of that. And, learning on the fly and knowing that God had me then. And I knew that he had me now, because he placed, I guess, the stepping stone to where we were in 2024, because I was like, okay, I know the hospital routine. I know what to ask the doctors. I've been through it. I understand what I need to do now to help her. And it was just miraculous back then that I would wake up every morning and say, God, give me the strength to do what it is that you want me to do, because I don't know. Put the people in place, because I don't know what I'm doing. And every day, somebody would come in. It's like, okay, this is what we need to do, Miss Harris. This is what we need. And I was like, okay. So learning from that, I thought, this team, they got us. And, we didn't know any neurosurgeons or anything. I did have a friend, through Notre Dame. And in my mind, I was thinking, her son went through brain cancer, because Holly was good friends with the daughter. And I said, when I get a chance, I have to call her, because I need her to tell me what I need to ask, because I don't know. And so after we got through all of that, I tell you, God is good, because I know with UVA, the hospital, there are single rooms, but most of them are always doubles. And I was like, Holly is not going to do well in a double room. We had single rooms throughout her stay. We arrived January 31st, and we didn't leave the hospital until February 12th.
So the reorientation of what that must have entailed for you in terms of your own day-to-day, I can imagine for Holly, and she did talk about that for herself, but for you, Denise, you just dropped everything.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, I didn't leave her side. When Ira was able to relieve me, because he was, teaching, and fortunately is right there at UVA, so he could just walk over to the hospital. I would rush home, take a shower, and come back. And I did that a couple of times until we got a room that had a shower in it, and I didn't have to do that anymore. And so he would, I forgot this. Can you bring, we had nothing, initially. And so he had to bring everything, to us. I'm trying to think about, what do I need? I don't know what I need. I just know I need to care for Holly. And so, yes, I dropped everything, because that was going to be my new life. I need to make sure she was okay. I needed to be there when the doctors made their rounds early in the morning to hear what they had to say. And, sleeping in a chair, which wasn't comfortable. So I just put all of that aside. I just said, I got to be here, because she was scared. She didn't know what was going on. And when we finally were assigned the neurosurgeon, he treated her like she was his daughter. And I just thought, this is nothing but God. He's given us the people that we need in our emotional state to help us through this.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody from the residents to the nurses to just the hospital maintenance staff to everybody, they just see us and just give us what we needed when we needed it, and we didn't know that we needed it. And I remember one morning, I was just so tired, and she was finally resting well. This is before her surgery. And I thought, okay, I can get some shut eye finally and not worry about her. And the maintenance lady that would always come early in the morning would always wake up and talk to her and tell her to have a nice day and everything. And then one morning I woke up and I said, oh, she hasn't been here. That's odd, because she normally comes at a certain time. And when she came in, I said, oh, I thought you forgot about it. She said, oh, no, I came in and you all were both sleeping so peacefully. I didn't want to wake you.
Oh.
And I wanted you to sleep.
Hmm.
And I just burst into tears because just that nice gesture of, by me showing kindness to her, she showed kindness to me.
Oh my
And
gosh, yes.
so it was an ordeal. And then February 6th was her operation date. And they didn't do it right away because they wanted to make sure they had the operating room that had all of the machines necessary for her, that they didn't have to wheel her out to another room to get an MRI or other tests that they need to do. They can do it all in that one operating room. So we had to wait for that to become available. And when it did, she had the surgery that day, and it was nerve wracking
Probably
for
surreal
us.
for you too,
Yeah,
just to even be
it was, I don't know, 6 or 8 hour surgery. I can't quite remember how long it was, but I just remember they had a special waiting area for families for brain surgeries that was quieter and smaller than the normal waiting area. And I just remember I was just so tired and exhausted because I was up all the time with her. I didn't want to fall asleep because I didn't want to miss anything if they came by, but that was my time to rest. And I know I had like a good 4 hour nap in that room. And when the doctor finally came and said that the surgery was finished and they were going to put in an ICU, and then we can go and visit her after that. And I tell you, when I saw her in ICU and her face was swollen, and I didn't realize what I was going to see. And so I just broke down because her face was so swollen. I thought, oh my gosh, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, oh, because she was face down the whole time. And so all the blood rushed to her face, but it'll go back down to normal. And it did.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't, no one prepared me for that.
Yeah.
So that was a shock to my system. So then I thought, and I had been writing, documenting for myself, my emotions and what I was going through. And I thought, I'm going to photo journal too. So I was, I had already been doing it, taking pictures probably prior to the surgery. And she was fine with that. But when I started taking pictures of her in ICU, she kind of snapped at me a little bit. Now it's funny, but I was like, well, Holly, I just want to document what we're going through. And I said, I'm not sharing this with anybody. It's just that I want it for myself. And I guess it was probably later last year when she said, oh, I wish I had pictures of the time when I was in ICU, what was going on. I was like,
By the way,
wait a minute. I have those, remember? Because you snapped at me that you didn't want me taking those pictures. So she was very grateful that I had her journey from the operation to where she is now. And I wanted her to see the progress that she's making. They had her up and walking the next day at ICU, and they forewarned us that she may have the tube in her mouth for a while, but that tube came out shortly after she got in ICU, and they were shocked that she was breathing on her own. And I thought, I'm not, because we have to go through this, but on the other end, it's going to be glorious. I just know that God already told me he got this. And so I'm just waiting for it all to be over. I don't wish that on any parent, but I'm glad that I was able to be there by her side to help her through that journey, because if I worked outside the home, I probably wouldn't have been able to be there as much as I was. And I know Holly like the back of my hand. And so I know what she needed, and she needed me to be there. And I was going to be there no matter what physical effects it was having on me. I had to be there for her, and I had to show her my strength so she could gain her strength. And, I didn't beat her down. It's like, oh, you shouldn't be feeling that way. I let her have her sorrows, and I just listened to it and hugged her and just kept reassuring her it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I'm not leaving you. I'm going to be with you every step of the way. And I was.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I thought, after the surgery, I said, Holly, do you mind if I share with a couple of my friends to let them know what's going on with us? And she said, no, I don't mind. And then she said, oh, well, wait a minute. Can I give you the list of my friends so you can include, And so the village just kept growing. I mean, I had like 5 different lists of, people from here and abroad and her friends. And even those friends told their friends and they were praying. So it was just like this huge circle of people that some I knew and some I didn't know. And it was just such a beautiful thing. It's like, because I was raw
Yeah, of
and
course.
vulnerable with my emotions. I said, I need to let them know that I'm also doing okay for the most part. But Holly is also, so I was journaling her steps, daily and sending them
Yeah. Well, it sounds
updates
like
on
too,
her.
even with your faith, Denise. So you mentioned faith right away. And then you also talked about the woman who would come in the mornings to clean things up and how you befriended her and that there was this sense of relationship and that you sound like you're one who builds community wherever you go. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah. Everyone has a story.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. They
just
sure do. We all do.
we all do. And just showing a little bit of kindness to somebody. Perhaps something bad happened or they were in a bad mood and you didn't know about it. And so I just try to give people joy because I want joy, in my life. And I had started a self-care journey after I went to grief counseling because I lost both my parents 6 months apart in 2019.
Wow.
So that I was devastated. It took me 2 years really to get over that. And so I was going to grief counseling, and the first thing she told me was, I tell all of my female patients they need to take a trip by themselves, just themselves, just to go away. And I thought, I'm going to do that. And then, it was COVID. So, of course, I couldn't do that right away. But once COVID lifted, I thought, I started doing that. I'm from Florida originally. So I'm a beach girl, and water soothes me. It always has. And so I would just make
Very
these
calming, very soothing. It
very
brings you
calming,
back to source, right? Yeah. From
and even, when I couldn't get to the beach during COVID, I would just look at YouTube videos of the ocean and the waves crashing and just meditate and just read because it was very soothing for me. And it still is. I still do that. So when I started going, I would befriend again the housekeeping staff. And it's like, oh, why are you here? I said, oh, I'm on my self-care journey. I said, as women, we know we need to take this. And
yeah.
I remember this one housekeeper, she said, I love that. I'm going to start doing that because you're right. I said, yes, I know we all need to do self-care. So all my friends now I'm texting, remember, self-care doesn't have to be a long time. You can just take 5 minutes, self-care, go in the room, close the door, tell it no one to disturb you, and just have that moment because we all need that time to breathe.
I think that's, as women especially, that is not one of our strengths because often socialization wise, it's pretty much socialized out of us, conditioned out of us because our moms didn't have the luxury of really
No,
what it was to to even do anything around self-care as much as it was more caring for everyone else.
and it still was.
Right.
Even during the time with Holly, I had to remember to take
To
those times.
fortify you, right? To
Yes.
and to consider like who holds you? Who's able to hold the space for you and allow you to let down? Like who was that for you? I know God sounds like was very fortifying.
Yeah, so I have, well, the friend from Notre Dame, I would talk to her about it.
Yeah.
Her son had a different brain tumor than Holly, so his treatment was different than hers. So I talked to her a lot. But I have another dear friend from Indiana, Susan, who just even now, she's still my rock because I remember I would call her after we got home from the hospital and Holly was taking a nap, and I would go into the room and close the door.
Yeah.
I would call her, and I didn't get a hold of her, so I left her a message, and she called immediately back because she was on a walk, and she said, I heard in your voice you needed to talk. What's going on? And I just broke down. I said, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I said, I
Yeah.
just need to unload on somebody, but I can't let Holly know that I'm unloading because I got to be strong for her. And so she, and she was, a therapist too, so social worker. So she understood. So she let me vent. And then she just, consoled me. And then I was okay. And I was like, okay. So whenever I needed something, Martha, I can't tell you that the love our village showed us, from spa treatments to gift baskets to cards on a daily basis, or people that I hadn't talked to frequently constantly calling and saying, how you doing? And how's Holly doing? How's the family doing?
Mm.
So, because I didn't want to burden Ira or our other kids with all of this. It was something I thought I had to manage on my own because I got to still be strong, be that nurturer for everybody else. I can't let them break down too.
Mhm,
Keep
mhm.
my emotions at bay and break down when I'm alone. But I
Yeah,
needed to vent to somebody. And so
absolutely.
I had her to lean on to let me just vent and talk. People would come to the hospital and just say, I don't know how you're smiling and how you're being so strong. Because I would send these long texts on a daily, it was daily at first and then it became weekly as Holly was getting better. And it was like,
Mm.
you're lifting us up because you found humor in what you're saying, but we know that it's not humorous, but you're just trying to let everybody know that you're okay.
That's right.
And while still giving the grim details of, oh, Holly had a really bad day today, and this is what's going on. And then I always say, but. And then my friend Susan said, I always look for that but because I knew something good was going to come after that. So I knew you were doing okay. So,
I think
uh,
that's really, it sounds like that's so much of how you navigate hard things is it's the and, I'd like to say. So it's this and this so that it doesn't negate one or the other. It holds the power of all of it and
yeah.
the significance of it, but it doesn't out or overshadow one another. Yeah.
No, no, it was just something to keep you going to the next day because something new was going to come up. And so Holly had 3 treatments. She had the surgery, she had proton beam radiation treatment, and she had chemotherapy.
Mm.
And unfortunately, we had to go away from home to DC to Georgetown University because they were one of the locations that was close to us that had proton beam therapy. And
Okay.
that was for 6 weeks. But as my friend Susan would always say, these are God winks. So this was another God wink, was Holly had her apartment in DC still because that's where she was working.
That's right. She was
Yeah,
taking a brief
right.
gap year
So
hiatus.
we didn't have to rent a hotel room. We stayed in her apartment. It was familiar with her,
Mm.
for her. And so she had her things. And
Mm.
so we stayed there and I befriended the rental staff too. I need to park my car. This is what's going on. It's like, oh, we were wondering what happened to Holly. We hadn't seen her. So they were always asking about her and things. So I was able to use the garage for a short period that we were there. And
You said something a little bit a few moments back about you want joy and need joy, so you bring joy to others and they bring it to you. Like it's a give and receive.
mhm,
And I was thinking that you obviously get that in a way that most people might not really understand. Like what you put out comes back to you.
mhm.
And so much of what I think you have in terms of even just knowing what your needs are and being able to also meet those needs by reaching out to others and in a way that they feel fed and nourished. And then they're able to come back to you. Like it's really kind of beautiful. Have you always been that way? Have you always
It,
known that to be true? Okay.
as I was thinking about my life and what was going on, it didn't really dawn on me until my mom said to me when I was caring for her that a childhood friend had stopped by to visit her years ago and shared a story with her that I hadn't thought about in years.
Mm.
And it was a group of friends and I had gone to the next town over to go-kart racing because that was a big thing back in the 70s. And we were all excited to go. And so we were all on the go-kart course. And this particular go-kart that the younger friend was in, it was malfunctioning. And so when she did the bump, the gas tank, it kind of exploded. And so gas got all over her. And
Oh
so,
my gosh.
we all stopped and ran over and immediately, got water and kind of washed it out of her hair and everything. And then when they saw that she was okay, And I really wanted to go back to go-kart racing because it was a fun activity, but no one else was. They went back and didn't think twice about her. And I said, I can't do that. I got to sit here with her and hold her because she's upset. Yeah, she was scared. And so I thought, yes, I want to do this other thing, but she needs me more. So I'm going to forego what I want to do to tend to her needs. And so when my mom told me that, I said, I had thought about that story in years. So yeah, so I think all along I've been like that.